What's going on, dudes and dudettes? Today I have a pretty interesting one for you. Now, please ignore the fact that I have new avatars. That was supposed to be explained in the video I have coming out in about 1 or 2 days from now, but as soon as I saw Sony do the PS5 Teardown, I dropped everything I was doing harder than the bass and nonstop by Drake. Needless to say, I wanted to get this video out as soon as possible. And the first and arguably most important thing I noticed about the PS5 Teardown was what Otori, who is the VP of Sony's mechanical design department, says this.
PS5 では長期で安定した高い冷却性能を実現するため、このティムに液体金属を採用しました。
And I wonder who said a full month ago that the PS5 might use this type of thermal interface material. Oh yeah, that was me. Okay, let me stop showboating. At the time, it was just a hunch that I had because of an odd patent by Sony that surfaced on the internet a couple of days prior that made a lot of heads turn. I for one thought it might very likely happen, so I made a video explaining on how it would work. And of course, there were people who didn't agree with me and thought I was just going for clicks, but as it turns out, I was right, and personally, I think the topic as a whole is pretty interesting, so if you want, you can go ahead and check it out here, or at the link in the description. But enough about this liquid metal stuff. I'm here to explain exactly what happened during the PS5 teardown and why you should be excited about it. We're not going to go through the entire thing, just the parts I personally want to comment on or parts that I think deserve some breaking down. And you guys might notice that Otori uses some relatively weird terminology that you might not be familiar with if you're new to the PS5 hardware scene. If you're not new, then of course this stuff will seem pretty simple to you. But for those of you guys who are, luckily I've discussed pretty much everything there is to know about the PS5 so far heavily on the channel. So whenever a term comes up that you're not familiar with, I'll link a video I've made explaining it at the top right corner of your screen, and I'll also be creating a playlist with all of my PS5 explanations and linking that down below as well. So after this video, if you still find yourself being a bit confused, click on that playlist, and after about 30 to 40 minutes of binge watching, you'll be all caught up with the PS5 hardware. And the reason I decided to create that playlist instead of, let's say, re-explaining everything in this video is because number one, it would take a century. So for those of you guys who had hopes of seeing this video before the PS6, I'm sorry, but GG no re. And number two, I wanted this video to be a bit more opinionated about what I saw, because I kind of want to get into the Xbox side of things a little bit later. Now don't get me wrong, I'm still going to be breaking down this video. I'm just not going to stop to explain every single term that I use is what I mean. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it.
サイズは幅 104mm、高さ 390mm、奥行き 260mm と PS4 より一回り大きくすることにより
Okay, so first things first. Holy mother of that's big. Okay, so we kind of knew that the PS5 would be a thick boy with 3 C's even before we got this official metric, thanks to all the smart people of the internet who drew up size comparisons by resizing the PS5's disk drive and lining it up with other consoles. But wow, actually seeing it laid out in front of us in official dimensions just throws me into another world, because these numbers are not small, like at all. This is debatably, no, not even debatably, this is the largest video game console ever created. Now personally, that won't matter too much to me because I have a pretty decently sized desk and I don't think I'll have too much trouble finding room for it after I throw my PS4 and Xbox One in the closet, but still, it's pretty huge, so just keep that in the back of your head when making any sort of spacing decisions. So next, Otori confirms here that the PS5 will have a total of 3 USB Type-A ports, 1 in the front and 2 in the rear, 1 USB Type-C port in the front, an Ethernet port in the back, as well as an HDMI out port right below that. You know, pretty standard stuff. I don't think this shocked anyone. But what is a bit confusing is that Sony called the Type-C port at the front of the console and the Type-A ports at the back of the console super speed, and says that they have a maximum transfer rate of 10 gigabits per second. I don't know why they didn't just say that they were USB 3.1 generation 2 ports, because that's what they are, since they could obtain that transfer speed. But regardless, yep, that's what they are. The other USB port at the front labeled high speed is probably USB 2.0, which allows for data transfer rates of up to 480 megabits per second, or around 10% of the speed of the super speed ports we just talked about. Fun fact, by the way, if you want to play PS5 games from an external hard drive, well, you can't because of the architectural differences in Sony's custom SSD and what's on the market right now. But even if we ignore that, Sony's SSD is so fast that even the latest USB 3.1 generation 2 ports literally would not be able to transfer data fast enough for it to work. And I see some of you guys might be scratching your heads right now like, Innocence, but you said the super speed USB transfer rate was 10 gigabytes per second. Can't Sony's SSD only do 5.5 gigabytes per second raw? Well, no. Actually, with the help of Sony's Kraken decompressor, which I explained halfway through this video here, the PS5's SSD can obtain data transfer speeds of up to 22 gigabytes per second, which is absolutely bonkers by the way. And also, G lowercase bps doesn't actually mean gigabytes per second, it means gigabits per second, which means it's about 1/8 the speed you might intuitively assume. For example, the super speed ports on the PS5 are 10 gigabits per second, which translates to around roughly 1.25 gigabytes per second, meaning nowhere near as fast to handle the games that are dependent on the PS5's SSD. But let's continue.
ここに冷却用のファンが内蔵されています。両側から大量の空気を吸い込みます。
I just wanted to say something quick about the positioning of the vents here, and that they're also freaking huge. Now, if you caught my PS5 Reveal Breakdown video, you'd know that I already speculated that the PS5 would most likely run quieter and cooler than the Xbox Series X, and this kind of reaffirms that. I mean, seriously, these vents are as gargantuan as the console, and make any tiny participation trophy air vents on the PS4 and PS4 Pro shiver in fear. You might as well leave the thing out in the open if the vents are that big. Jokes aside, this is obviously a good thing. Despite its size, I'm really starting to think that this console might be the quietest one ever released. A hot take, I know. Or is it a cool take? Whatever. And here, Otori shows us how the PS5 stand mechanism will work. And I've gotta say, I like that they're including a stand from the jump, so we won't have to buy vertical stands from third-party manufacturers with names harder to pronounce than the word anti-disestablishmentarianism. But honestly, gone are the days of buying console stands from knockoff foreign brands that claim your console will run 40% cooler because of it and boost performance, which is obviously untrue. Oh, and it's really cool that they included a little compartment for the screw that holds the stand in place, because if they didn't, my first complaint would be that I lost it and I don't even have the console yet.
両側の白いパネルはお客様自身で取り外しが可能です。後ろの角を持ち上げてスライドすると外せます。
So here Otori takes the side panels off the PS5, and I just want to mention the attention to detail here by Sony. They managed to hide every single screw hole while the console is intact to give off the cleanest look possible, while still adding a bit of character to the design by making the side panels wavy. And judging by how the side panels came off, you could really tell that everything here was really thought out, from the flamboyant look of the console to how the panels hide the two holes that you could literally use to vacuum. Yeah, vacuum the dust out of your PS5 without completely taking it apart if need be. Everything about this setup just screams hours upon hours of trial and error and the word custom. The physical design was not something that was thought of overnight, and you could really see the character and flexibility they put into this thing, but more on that when I talk about Xbox at the end of this video.
ここに冷却用のファンが内蔵されています。両側から大量の空気を吸い込みます。
Here we see Otori talk about the intake fan, which draws in air from both sides of the console, which is another thing that I predicted by the way, when I said at the end of my PS5 Reveal Breakdown video that surprisingly, the airflow path of both the PS5 and Xbox Series X would be very similar, both traveling vertically through the console. The only confirmed difference now being that the paths go in opposite directions, and the PS5's exhaust creates a bit more of a curved shape.
将来の拡張ストレージ用としてPCIe 4.0 に対応した M.2 インターフェースを搭載しています。
Here he brings up the SSD slot you'll be able to use to expand the storage of your PS5, which presumably, unlike the Xbox Series X, will not be limited to 1TB and can be purchased from third parties like Samsung, Corsair, WD, Intel, or what have you. Though compatible storage drives will not be available for a bit of time, while drives that are as fast or faster than the PS5 are still being designed, built, and tested. Ah yes, the classic, please don't do this or you'll avoid your warranty sticker. 2 void your warranty stickers? Jeez, what are they hiding in here? Okay, let's skip all this stuff and get to the juicy bits. Oh, wait, go back. Though I will say it's pretty cool that they included some vibration insulating pads to keep the Blu-ray player from shaking your console or making noise, because let's be serious, it's pretty annoying when a console turns your desk into a massage table. And this also adds to the theme of keeping this console as quiet as possible, which if you haven't noticed already, Sony is really trying to hammer home. Here, we get the first ever look at the PS5 system RAM, which isn't that exciting in and of itself because we already know that it uses GDDR6 tech compared to last gen which uses GDDR5, making its maximum transfer rate of data roughly 50% faster than that of last gen, per memory unit at least. But when you take into account that there seems to be 8 memory units at presumably 2 GB a pop, the thing actually ends up having a memory transfer rate about 110% faster than that of a PS4 Pro. But enough of that boring stuff. What's interesting to me is that the CPU and processing die are on the opposite side of the motherboard, something that Sony started widely implementing with the PS4 Pro. And if you guys don't have anything else to compare to, here's a picture of the Xbox Series X's motherboard. You see, the memory and processor are on the same side, and that's the standard way of doing things in computer building, in PCs, consoles, whatever. Now, I'm not saying what Sony did here is an amazing feat of engineering or that I can think of any practical purpose as to why they would build it like that, but you could bet your bottom dollar that there definitely is a reason that they did it, whether we could figure it out or not. And if I had to guess, it probably has something to do with evenly distributing the cooling across both sides of the motherboard in an attempt to keep things as isolated and as cool as possible. And fun fact, we can confirm that the memory is passively-ish cooled. Would you consider this passive cooling? Whatever. If you slow down, you can actually see the residue thermal pad on the memory in these frames here that we don't see when they are officially presented to us. And since the memory is passively-ish cooled, it's going to need all the proper airflow it could get, which is my best guess as to why it's on the other side of the motherboard. Regardless, this whole memory configuration just screams custom. Like, it's not often that you see a motherboard built like this. In fact, I've only ever seen Sony do something of this nature, so it's a pretty neat fact to keep in the back of your head. And here we have the processor and graphics card APU, which honestly we've beaten to death here on the channel, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but the processor has 8 cores and 16 threads of horsepower and features AMD's Zen 2 architecture with a variable clock speed ranging probably between 3 GHz and a maximum of 3.5 GHz. The GPU sports a similar story, providing 36 compute units clocked at a variable frequency capped at about 2.23 GHz for a total of 10.28 teraflops. Not that teraflops matter anyways. What's interesting to me, however, is that when they show the PS5's APU with its liquid metal shield on, it looks eerily similar to the patent I discussed in my liquid metal video. Again, link down below. And now we come to the big boy, the cavalry, the muscle, one might say, the PS5's SSD. Now, I can go on for days and days about this thing. In fact, on the channel, I already have, so I'm not going to make this video longer than it has to be. But I will say that this thing is a powerhouse, and quite frankly, unlike anything I've ever seen. The SSD tech inside this console is what makes the loading screens in games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart virtually non-existent, even when jumping in between completely different worlds with completely different assets. Trust me, going in between worlds like this would probably require a 10 to 30 second loading screen on the current generation of hardware, making the entire concept of this game unplayable. I cannot stress enough how impressive the SSD is, and to finally see it physically is pretty damn cool. And finally, we get to the PS5's main heatsink, which is really weirdly shaped, might I add. But I only have one major thing to say about this. Can you guess what it is? Yeah, it's humongous. Like, golly, that's a thick heatsink. That might be thick with 4 C's in heatsink terms. In fact, it's so big and so weirdly shaped that Otori actually says that despite using a heat pipe, it is actually able to achieve the same performance as a vapor chamber, which, though I didn't explicitly predict since I said the PS5 would use a vapor chamber, and turns out it just has the performance of one, I'm still gonna take it as my W since Sony thought it was important enough to bring up in the video. So haha, 2 for 2 baby. And that's gonna bring us to the end of the teardown, breaking down the very custom PS5, which by and large impressed me a lot. And here's what I have to say about Xbox in the same regard, since some of you guys would probably want me to mention that. To keep it simple, I don't think the Series X is as cool or as clean as the PS5 in terms of its internal layout of hardware. And I think that comes down to one main reason, the fact that Sony's hardware and chassis just seems infinitely more custom and deliberate when compared to Microsoft's. And to further explain myself so I don't look like a complete idiot, it's like Microsoft had a form factor in mind and built their hardware and cooling solution with that mental limitation in place, while Sony on the other hand just went full send with the innards of the thing and decided to customize whatever they needed to later, leading to the oddly shaped console and maverick cooling solutions. It's more of a no compromise, all effort, no expense too great mentality when compared to Microsoft, which is probably why my brain looks at this thing and thinks, damn, how did they think of that? Or now why would they do that? Thoughts that don't happen as often when I look at the Series X. But that's just my opinion. Let me know if you disagree down below in the comments. But with that being said, dudes and dudettes, expect another video relatively soon, and let me know what you thought of this whole reaction breakdown video. I read almost all the comments and I love hearing from you guys. Alright, well, I'm gonna end it there. I've been Innocence, you've been the audience, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.